Hello, fans and subscribers of the Milwaukee Train Man. I am the Milwaukee Train Man, and this will be episode 2 of our rebuild of MTH Little Joe number E20. Before I do the internal walkthrough, the first thing I want to talk about is the sound file, because you've already heard it a little bit. I did go and use an ESU GG1 sound file, and I will say right away, I'm not happy with it. I don't care for it. It doesn't sound like what I think a Little Joe is supposed to sound like, which that's hard to experience because obviously they're gone. But there's a couple of recordings of the South Shore one, the South Shore 800 out at Illinois Rail Museum, and there's like one piece of video with corresponding audio of actual Milwaukee Road Little Joe. The GG1 isn't even close. But on a tip, I did try there's a file for the Aucision 85 class. It's an Australian electric. It is much closer to a Little Joe, much closer than a GG1 sound file. Okay, so for your benefit, rather than show photos of this part, I'm going to just go ahead and shoot video and do a little walkthrough on the inside of E20 here. So it's quite a bit different from where we started out, right? First obvious thing, the decoder. So I believe, as I've said, I chat with a guy who used to work in Mike's Train's house back shop, doing repairs on all the models, like the factory defect kind of stuff. So he's very well aware of what I'm doing with this thing, and he knows these pretty well inside and out. And once I showed him like what decoder I was using, he did caution me against using this particular one because he's concerned that the motor is going to eat it. And at first I was kind of skeptical of that. But this past weekend, I was actually stress testing E20 with the shell, of course, on one of my kind of higher drag, heavier freight trains. It's a freight train I specifically built for like my Z8 4664, my Northern Pacific mallet, 2-pole, or my 261 or big steam, right? So I haven't done my complete due diligence in tuning all the cars with a truck tuner or something like that. So it kind of drags, right? Now, E20 in one piece was able to pull it. I do want to say that after all this modification I've done, he was able to muscle that train from a start on a grade and keep it going. No problem. Okay, now this train takes, like, you need 3 diesels, like 3 Athearn diesels to pull that train. Or you need a big heavy steam engine or something. This guy didn't complain, did it just fine. However, the motor was growling on me. So the decoder is probably fine in all honesty, but just for that peace of mind, because like this is $120+ I am going to go ahead and change it. So this unit here is ESU part number 58821. It's meant as a direct fit for like Athearn, Genesis, Atlas, Intermountain diesels, stuff like that. So I'm actually going to go ahead. I'm going to repurpose this for one of my Milwaukee diesels. And I'm going to go ahead and put one of these ESU 21 pinners in there, right? So a full-size ESU decoder is what my buddy recommended. So one of these should be just fine. Regular, good old 21-pin sound decoder. I already have the conversion parts ordered because in this particular spot, or this particular locomotive, I'm going to go ahead and we're doing it like a blue box. So I'm going to use the good old Digitrax 9-pin wire harness. Tie it in where required. And we'll just have, there'll be like a conversion board here, actually from Soundtrax, like 9-pin JST to a 21-pin decoder. So that'll be here with the decoder hanging off of it, tape it up with Captain tape like this stuff, and then we're gonna just stick them probably right there. So, and it should be safe and sound like that. Once that's all done, I'll come along and do the lights. I was for sure going to reuse these. I'll probably just reuse this one and then do a rear headlight on my own, because I was thinking I would like to have independent control of the class lights. I do like to use those. So, and if I'm really motivated, maybe ground lights, we'll see. Probably wouldn't be too hard on a little Joe, if I'm being honest, but so anyway, otherwise, while we're in here, the reason I do want to explain the reason why I want to have that decoder set up over here, kind of like a blue box, is because with the way this is stacked, that just barely clears the roof of the body. So when I have the shell on and I pull that panel, like where you would adjust the volume originally, there's a little hole because that's the switches are gone, right? But I can, like, this guy's staring me in the face. He's right there. So I don't have a whole lot of room to stack stuff up in there, all said and done. Moving on, the other modification that's pretty plainly obvious, all that gray stuff. So that's that tungsten I've been talking about. Those are tungsten chips. I get them off eBay from a vendor, TX_Alchemist, Texas Alchemist, something like that. And they are from Texas. But they carry all sorts of these little tungsten weights. And these were actually a tip from a friend. But Texas Alchemist sells these, and that's not a plug. That's just seriously who I just buy them from. Sells them with the intent, those are meant for like Pinewood Derby cars. But holy crap, these have come in so handy for HO scale locomotives, and I would imagine even N scalers could use them with how big they are. Like, those are super flat. But I have stacked those like Athearn Genesis GP9s. They have just a real skinny little fuel tank. It's not very deep. I was able to get, a layer or two of those in there and bring it up by half an ounce, three quarters of an ounce to an ounce maybe per diesel. For a GP9, that's a lot, and those guys really need it because otherwise they are just super lightweight. And you get them on a heavy diet, and then they can suddenly start pulling stuff like they mean it. So, like I said, 2 ounces of tungsten in this bad boy, and the reason why I use the tungsten, now this stuff isn't cheap, I will say that. It's about, I think the last time I looked, it was almost $4 per ounce. Okay, so I don't just throw this stuff at every box car, right? Like, these are my special use, like, weight solution. So I could have used like the traditional like lead auto parts, like car wheel weights. I could have just stuck a couple of those in there, but I wasn't sure, if I'm being honest. I didn't want to have any, binding or anything, or any conflict with the shell or the pantograph motors, because those are still here. So those occupy like this space right here over this kind of little cup. That's where those motors go. So I couldn't put stuff in the way there. But then again, also with these smaller weights, like I can fit them here in the nooks around the speakers, here, like along the motor. This is actually all double stacked. So that's how I ended up getting 2 ounces of that stuff. Now, 2 ounces makes a big friggin' difference. I will say that. Now, I have tried that in diesels, like Athearn RTR diesels with the removable fuel tank. Drop the fuel tank, stuff kind of the cheeks of the fuel tank with these, like the round part with these little guys. I got like an extra ounce and like 3/4 in there, and now they're pulling like the scale trains SD40s. So this stuff goes a really long way, and I think that's part of why E20 is now able to pull like that one freight train of mine all by itself, like a little Joe should be able to, right? They were ungodly strong locomotives. So that's kind of what I'm going for. If I can get this guy to drag, let's say a quote unquote transcontinental freight train of mine up Hennepin Overland's branch line, I will be unbelievably happy because that's exactly what I want him to do. So ideally in a pair, that would look awesome. But E74 isn't quite there yet. So I'm a little busy, too busy with this one to get to that one just yet. But he's in the pipe, and I'd have a decoder and a conversion board for him ordered too. So last thing while I'm in here, speakers. So I'm not going to say that you should do this. This was just a personal preference. These are Scale Sound Systems speakers. So he 3D prints this kind of puck enclosure, and there's a sugar cube speaker stuck in there. So the benefit for that is he custom fits every enclosure to each sugar cube, so they are nice and tight. And I believe the guy's like a sound engineer as a day job, so I trust that he knows sound stuff, and he has these tuned pretty well. Especially if you can get them into a locomotive or a tender shell that really resonates, those speakers will just sing for you. Like I said, that's just a personal preference. In fact, I would even say if we're talking about like one of the newer ones like E74, I'm not going to change the speakers in E74. They are just fine to me. Maybe not as good as these, if I'm being honest, but there's no reason for me to go and change them, at least not yet. Especially when considering like the original lights kind of they're mounted up on top of the, there's like a speaker kind of cage. The lights sit up on top of those. So just be aware, if you're going to change the speakers like I did, you will need to reconfigure how your lights mount, right? Which isn't that hard, but... And I should also point out, these are tied together. This green wire, that's speaker, so decoder, speaker, speaker, decoder. That's how I have it set up. And I'm honestly thinking I would like another one, maybe one of the little sugar cubes, kind of like a tweeter, stuck up high somewhere, because I can barely hear the horn on this thing. And I suppose you have a Wabco E2 air horn, it's probably going to blend into the prime mover. They're about the same kind of, octave, tone range. And maybe that's just inevitable. I don't know. I would like to try it and just see what happens anyway. But otherwise, that's it. That's your tour of the new interior of my Milwaukee E20. So it's a lot different from where we started, while still using the original drive, trucks, and gears. It's so weird with that wire.